And so if you're struggling to make connections, if you really kind of don't have time to network, if you feel like, you're just don't have the capacity or the resources to network like you would, I'm hoping that you'll find from this podcast, there are lots of stories. We're all a lot more alike than you think, and that you'll come away with some golden tidbit that will help you really realize your best self.
Hi, this is Dr. Christie Cornelius, and you are joining us on the Veterinary Insider. I'm your new host, and I am delighted to have you join us today for a truly special episode. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Bonnie Bragdon, the visionary founder and past president of the Independent Veterinary Practitioner Association. This episode is not only a celebration of her remarkable legacy, but also a source of inspiration for anyone striving to innovate and lead in our field. I invite you to settle in and join us as we explore the remarkable legacy of Dr. Bonnie Bragdon and the IVPA and discuss how her insights continue to guide and inspire the future of veterinary leadership. This episode has a lot to unpack, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. And without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Bonnie Bragdon. Well, thank you, Bonnie, for joining us. We have a lot to get to, so thank you for joining us. And welcome, Dr. Bonnie Bragdon.
Yeah, well, thank you, Christy. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm actually really excited to be on the other side of the mic.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the first question here. I'm going to ask you, what influences from your childhood or early life do you feel had the most impact on your decision to become a veterinarian?
Well, Christy, Dr. Christie, it's really interesting because I grew up in a small rural town in Maine. So I'm actually born and bred a maniac. And what I found was I was really smart and I wanted to go back to Maine. And I thought, really the only way I was going to be able to go back to a small rural community and be kind of smart is to really work with animals. And I felt like I really understood animals a whole lot more than I understood people. I'd go ride my horse and I'd be like, okay, well, this is why he did this or he did that. And I could understand that behavior much, much better than I could understand human behavior. So again, I grew up in the middle of like 200 acres and spent lots and lots of time with my animals and just thought that was the best way to go back and really serve my community. So that was the biggest influence. And then, of course, everybody says all creatures great and small. I'm of that generation where watched lots of PBS, and that was a really, really big influence on me.
Yeah, sounds great. That's such a great start to an awesome story that we're going to go through here. So tell me, what challenges did you encounter when you first started out as a new vet school graduate, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, well, honestly, my challenges started way earlier. So I left my rural town of Vassaboro, Maine, headed off to an unnamed semi-Ivy League college in Massachusetts and learned it was the first time I failed. And I failed big. So I was on academic probation. I missed classes. I did some things I wasn't supposed to. It was harder, right? I was used to being able to just kind of skip class and get things done. And that didn't work so well at college. Had some personal issues happen, dropped out of college, ended up pregnant at a very young age. So ended up entering veterinary school as a single mom with 2 kids. And I entered later in life. And so I started the whole, the traditional single mom having to make college work when it was not traditional and not acceptable. And so really trying to balance my kids' needs and my family needs and being able to pay for everything. And I just remember at one point, I had my newborn daughter on my left knee and I had my chemistry book open on my right knee. And we were just both crying. And I was like, I'm never going to be able to get through this. I'm never going to be able to get done. But here I am today. And I was able to complete it. And so whether you're a veterinarian, a new tech, or a new grad, I hope you find inspiration that no matter what you start, you can get through it.
Yeah, what an inspiring story. And thank you so much for sharing with us. I can't imagine having the responsibility of 2 small kids in vet school. So how did you study for tests?
I'm not really sure. And I think that's where I have this lifelong habit that I either need to be working and making progress and making money, or I need to be having fun. Like I really hate wasting time, and I hate having anything in between, because either I need to be fully engaged with my family and doing what I want to do and having fun, or I need to be working in a way that's going to, bring value to my family and bring money to my family. Because, I've been the breadwinner for a very long time. And so it was always important to make, I hate to say it, but money was a big focus for me. And always had to be thinking about how was I going to bring revenue into I was going to say the business, but into the family, make sure everybody got taken care of, and all that good stuff. So yeah, it was crazy. So my last year of vet school, Christie, we're gonna let it all hang out here. Let it all hang out. So again, but I'm hoping this really helps others who may be in a tight spot, who are struggling. But when I was in vet school, my last year of vet school, right? So going in, you're doing your clinics, you got to stay overnight, you got to be a part of the clinics and all that sort of stuff. And that was when I parted ways permanently with baby daddy. So I had a woman come in and live with me, and we were sharing expenses. We both had young kids, and she was doing babysitting on the side. Everybody ended up with head lice.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. So...
What a bummer.
I know, right? So that's when I learned that head lice is species specific, right? Yes, I had to inform the pediatrician that did not come from my dog. So those are just the funny things that you just have to laugh, and you have to get through it. But life is all about starting and completing and just getting through it. So yeah, that's one of my funky stories from vet school.
Yeah. Can you update us on how your kids are doing?
I am so excited to update you on how my kids are doing. They are far better human beings and adults than I will ever be. They both have wonderful husbands, and I now am a grandmother to 4 wonderful grandchildren. They got through college without having children early. They completed their studies. They are in great, stable relationships. And to date, I don't think anybody's had head lice.
Wow. Well, you were truly an inspiration for your kids, and there's no question why they turned out the way they did, and the success that they've been able to experience with a really great role model and toughness that you were showing to them over the years.
Well, thank you, Christie.
Yeah, you're welcome. So tell the listeners, how did your initial vision for your career evolve over time? And what experiences influenced that transformation?
Yeah, if there's one thing I could say to new graduates or even veterinarians who are mid-career and rethinking what they want to do is just be open to the universe. Because I was very focused on becoming an equine orthopedic surgeon. Never mind, I barely rode. I barely understood what lameness was. During my therogenology class, I remember my therio professor looking at me in the eye, and I have tears running down my face, and I'm saying, look, I can't feel anything. I can't palpate these mares. And he's like, well, maybe you just need to become a chicken veterinarian. And I was just so deflated, right? But I want to be an equine surgeon or an equine repro, right? And at the time, the thought of those old dogs with their nasty mouths and the old ladies with the poodles with the nasty teeth, I was like, oh my God, no, I never want to do that. I just really want to have a cool and exciting career with horses. And that's not where the universe took me. Where the universe took me was companion animal. And I actually grew to love those old dogs, right? Those old dogs with the older people. And I really found a great way to connect, not just with animals, but I started to learn how to deal with people. Had a great career in companion animal medicine. Found that I kind of got bored, thought maybe I might want to take a different direction. And that's where all of my experiences have led me to really dig into startup companies. So I currently am chief commercial officer for a startup diagnostic company. And I just seem to always be in the spot where I'm helping to start something new.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, you've demonstrated over and over, starting yourself up. And so obviously it would come naturally for you to be an entrepreneur on top of it as well. So congratulations, for all those transformations. And you've really made a great career for yourself thus far. And I know you still have some years ahead of you. So, and thinking about that, what do you think is the future moving forward? What does that look like for you?
Oh, yeah. I was joking as I was getting on that maybe I'll write a book next, right? So, just to back up a little bit too for our listeners, one of the things that I've had a great privilege to access, a great resource, which is personality testing. So over the years, I was, like all of us, I was a little different, didn't quite fit in. I'm not quite like other veterinarians. I'm not quite like the average population. And so through personality testing, what I learned is that I'm very future focused, that I like putting teams together. I actually like the creative process. I actually like systems. And so those things helped me become a veterinarian, and it actually helped me be really, really good at medicine and dermatology, not so good at surgery. And that's really helped me in my startup career. So I think that the best thing for anybody out there really wondering what the next steps are for their future is to do some personality testing, kind of figure out what makes you tick, and just experiment and try. And so my kids always accuse me when they ask me a question of avoiding the answer. But it's really, what's the future like? It's wherever the universe takes me. It's wherever I find interest. It's wherever my passion leads me and wherever I dig in. And honestly, I really do think it's in, finding fabulous new products that make practice easier for veterinarians. So right now I'm working on diagnostics, and I'm actually really excited about some other opportunities. And it's just the sky's the limit.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's back up just a little bit and let's think back. Who are your key mentors or figures in your life that helped guide your journey, and what lessons did they impact?
Yeah, that's a really, really hard one. So, I tend to kind of forge my own path forward. So what I like to do is I like to look at a lot of different people and really kind of learn from everybody in their own way to kind of understand what works for them and what would work for me. So I tend to kind of look to some fictional characters at times. So some of my favorite fictional characters these days are Quinn from Unreal, right? So that's all about a scripted, unscripted reality show where it's strong women who are competing in the marketplace to be leaders within their own right. And so where I take inspiration is oftentimes kind of living my best life through my alter egos, through fantasy and drama. Another one of my favorites is Mad Max Furiosa. So yeah, that strong woman and bringing it through. And really what I would really want anybody out there to know is I think the most important thing as you're looking for mentoring and coaching is networking and really interviewing with lots of different people that you would never expect to have any kind of connection with or gain any kind of value. Because it's that network that's going to get you forward. It's that network that's going to help you understand your passion and what's going to keep you jazzed. And it's going to take you in a direction that you may never have expected. So I kind of hop from mentor to coach to fictional character.
Yeah, that's really pointed. There's a lot of younger veterinarians out there that don't even know where to start when it comes to forming a network. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So I think the number one thing in life and networking is to be curious, right? So again, I'm telling you way more information, Dr. Christie, than I really should. But, growing up, I remember my first day of a new high school. I literally hid in the gym because I was so overwhelmed by all the new people. I didn't know how to interact with them. I couldn't make conversation. And it was just terrifying. And so for a very long time, the idea of walking into a crowded room where I was expected to socialize and to network, it was absolutely debilitating and terrifying. And what I learned is that I learned to just be curious. And so I've also had the luxury and privilege of going through sales training in my professional career. And I was able to observe and watch extroverts. And so I copy and I mimic until I learn the skill. And what I learned about networking is, hey, how are you? Tell me about yourself. Lots of open-ended questions. What do you like about your work? What do you struggle with about your work? What do you do on vacation? What do you do for fun? Who's your family? Tell me about growing up. So if you're just very curious, that allows others to talk about themselves, and being an introvert, that actually helps you with your listening skills. And lots of people like talking about themselves. So it's a really easy, fast way to get that network up and running.
Yeah, it's really important to make things, safe and casual, when it comes to people. So
yeah, and nothing's fatal. So I was with a group of friends, new friends the other night, and I said something that went over like a lead balloon. Oh my God, I was like, the old me would have been so embarrassed. And I just would have probably, walked away, made an excuse to go to the bathroom. And I just picked myself up, pretended like nothing ever happened, and just kind of walked through it. So overall, nothing you do is ever fatal or final. And we're all human beings, and we all understand embarrassment. So just the more that you can pretend to be comfortable and just be curious and have conversations. If you make an error in something that you say, or you feel like you may have upset somebody, you can just ask that question. I'm so sorry. Something I said, did it upset you? Did I take the conversation in the wrong direction? And just checking in and being honest and authentic really goes a long way with building that network.
Yeah, those are really good reminders. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, let's go ahead and switch gears. Let's talk about the IVPA, where you and I met. And the first thing I want to ask is, what inspired you to establish the Independent Veterinary Practitioner Association, and how did your personal journey shape that vision?
So I was inspired to start the Independent Veterinary Practitioners Association when I saw the leadership void that can occur when corporate buys a practice. So I've spent years traveling all over the country and all over the world, visiting veterinarians and understanding what drives them, and learning how much of an important part of their community they really are. And so it was really a kind of sad and worrisome that as we had corporatization and consolidation, that could really leave a void in our rural communities and our underserved communities. And sometimes it just didn't serve the needs of veterinarians in the practice. And so I really have a great deal of hope that the new leadership of the Independent Veterinary Practitioners Association is going to do a whole lot to make sure that veterinarians continue to own veterinary medicine. I grew up, my generation was really about, you became a veterinarian, you went to work at a practice, you either bought into that practice or you started a practice. And my journey started in Hepzibah, Georgia, my first job as an associate. And I worked with Janet Disler, who was an important part of my development as an early graduate. And, I was really motivated and inspired and really wanted to open my own practice. But I had a lot of barriers, right? There were a lot of barriers. At that time, it wasn't quite so easy to go to a bank and get funding. They weren't used to veterinarians and how reliable that revenue source is. So I ended up going a non-traditional path. I did a franchise, and that was great, taught me a lot, but decided it wasn't really enough. So I went into industry. So as an industry veterinarian, I traveled all over the country. I've even been able to travel to Japan and Europe and experience veterinary medicine all over the world. And as I was traveling with my sales team in the Southeast, I would go to small town after small town veterinarian, Hepzibah, Georgia, Thompson, Georgia, Columbus, Georgia, middle of nowhere, Jackson or Florida. We'd go to all these different clinics, and I really came to recognize how important that veterinarian and that veterinary practice was in that rural community, how they offered jobs. It was an alternative for smart people and clever people to have good jobs without having to leave their community. And so really understanding that those veterinarians were a pillar in the community. But then I started to experience, we'd go back to these clinics, and then I would see where there was a corporate buyout. And with that corporate buyout, I started to see a leadership void, and the culture of the practice changed, and it was harder for the practice to make decisions. It was harder for the practice to move forward. And so things really, really changed. And so I recognized how much the fabric of my profession was changing before my very eyes. And I wanted to make sure that we were really serving the needs of veterinarians and helping them be able to realize their dream, and that it just didn't disappear. And so that's where the Independent Veterinary Practitioners Association came in. So yeah, so I'm really excited. I'm excited because, I have to share with you, right? We're going to make this conversational. And so, Dr. Christie, I was excited because I've gotten to pass this on to Dr. Arnie and the new president and yourself. So, Dr. Christie, what's the new vision for IVPA? Where's it going? Where's it headed?
Yeah, we're with Arnie's lead, we are really motivated to really establish our membership and to be able to grow our membership. And in that growth of membership, be able to reach the numbers that we need in order to become active on the AVMA delegates. And so to have some influence, as we don't at this moment, and no independent veterinary group really does. And so to have that exposure and reach that milestone would really be amazing. And we really feel that the impact of the organization will be felt and much greater if we are able to achieve that. So that is our main goal going forward.
Nice. Well, I'm so excited to hear that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it, obviously, all because of you. And so we want to make sure that we maintain that legacy and for everyone to realize how important the independent veterinarians are for our communities. So thank you for bringing that to light. So, let's ask, so what core values did you prioritize when forming the IVPA? And how did these values guide the organization's early development?
Yeah, so really when I started, it was the idea that veterinarians were equivalent and capable in the business arena. So that's really, to me, the most core value for me. Because that's really all connected. So I have to admit, as I was working on my franchise clinic, one of the principles that was instilled upon me was that profit is good, right? We have to have revenue and we have to have profit in order to take care of ourselves, our patients, our families, the people who work for us. And so profit is a good thing. Money is a good thing. It's the oxygen that kind of breathes life into everything we do, right? We want to make sure that animals are taken care of. We want to make sure that our people who work for us, that they're taken care of. We got to take care of our families. And so profitability was really, really important. And yet so many times in my experience, and those experiences shall remain nameless, I would frequently hear that veterinarians, veterinarians, they just aren't very good at business. And I was like, that's not right. If you can learn the Krebs cycle and you can diagnose disease, then veterinarians are more than capable of learning how to manage a business. I'm not saying they have to, or they must, or they need to. They don't have to do that. But if they don't learn about the business of practice and they abdicate that to others, then all of the wealth is going to be stripped out of our profession. Not only the wealth, but the autonomy. And then we will lose control of our profession. So whether you want to own your practice or you simply want to own your medicine, we have to have a seat at the table to really be leaders in how the profession moves forward, whether that's financially or just from the standpoint of how we practice clinical medicine. But to me, the most important thing is that veterinarians really are in a leadership role and driving the profession forward to make sure that we have a profession that we all love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to have that veterinary leadership in place. And so it's important for the staff that are there to have that connection and, for the veterinarian to really, value, their team and to be able to build upon that. There's no reason that we as veterinarians, we're intelligent enough to learn business. They just need to set it in front of us, right? We just need to do it. And so, yeah, it may seem like a huge mountain at first, but you just take the small steps, right?
Exactly. And, it goes back to that whole idea, oddly enough, I don't really have that many mentors or coaches that I think about. But really what I do is I mimic others. Like, I know this sounds kind of creepy, but that's not really the intention. I was so socially awkward in so many years of my life that when somebody would ask me how I was, hey, Bonnie, how are you today? I wouldn't know how to answer, right? Like, was I supposed to tell them how I really felt? Was I supposed to go into detail? That awkwardness. So I watched other people how would they respond when they got asked, how are you doing today? And by learning and mimicking and watching and practicing and understanding what other people did, I started to practice. I would challenge myself to do more. And then I got to the point where it's like, that is the easiest thing to manage. And so I think it's the same with leadership. Like, give yourself small challenges. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't like flood your senses. Have some challenges for yourself and look, it doesn't matter who it is. Look at somebody that you feel like has leadership skills and doing a good job at leadership and just mimic it. Just practice it. Nothing's fatal. Nothing is fatal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So how do you maintain your focus and not get distracted by all these potential opportunities? Like, how do you root yourself in and just be able to focus on 1, 2, or 3?
Yeah, being an entrepreneur and working for a lot of startup companies, even for large companies, right? Focus is really, really hard. There are so many great ideas and only so much bandwidth to get those ideas done. So execution really sometimes becomes that much more important than strategy. And having the discipline to understand that everything always takes longer than you think. It's going to take more money than you think, and it's going to be harder than you think. And so really, I tend to be a big picture person because I tend to be systems-based, process-based. I like connecting. I like to have the big picture and connect the small things. And so by working with people who like the details and like the focus, that helps me focus on the big picture. It helps keep them engaged and focused on the small things. And really another thing I learned and took to heart is the idea of editing, right? The idea of discipline, having the discipline to say, no, that's not a priority. So, one of the things I like to think about is how much impact is that action really going to have on what I'm doing, and not going for complete, not going for perfection, but simply going for better. So that it's really, really hard to focus. There are so many good ideas and so many good ways and so much fun to have out there. But if you end up so distracted, then I saw a good saying, which is you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And I stole that from somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I know a lot of us struggle, especially entrepreneurs struggle with that, which do we pick, and what strategy is going to be best. And right. So how do you deal with uncertainty?
Oh, yeah. So I think that as clinicians, ambiguity and uncertainty is something that we get really good at handling. So, I kind of started to handle that when I was in practice, right? So kind of walking myself through this idea, what is the best case scenario? What's the best outcome that's going to occur, could occur? What's the worst outcome that could occur? And what's the most likely? And then it just becomes a decision of, well, what's the best outcome? What's the worst outcome? Am I willing to live with the worst outcome? And how likely am I going to be to achieve the best outcome? So you're starting to make decisions based on probability, and that helps clarify that ambiguity. The other thing is I like to think as I'm starting any project. I always think about it in two different ways. So one of the ways I think about it is it's this big block of marble. And I can see my statue. I know there's a statue in there. And sometimes I know exactly what the statue looks like, and sometimes I only know a little bit about what the statue looks like. And so I have to start. As hard as that is, I have to start. I have to start chipping away at the stone, and it has to be a reciprocal relationship. I have to understand how the stone reacts, and I have to see how the statue is coming along, and then I change how I interact with the stone or the problem in order to deal with that ambiguity and uncertainty. And so what I try to do is I try to take incremental steps towards an outcome I want, but I try to mitigate risk without taking really big steps that could be fatal. So I try something small. Was it a failure? Was it a success? And a failure is just as important as a success. And then I incrementally break it down into these small experiments so I can incrementally get to where I need to be. And the other way I think about it is this like knotted skein of yarn. And so you got to start at one end, and you just got to keep picking at the problem until it starts to unravel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that is such good advice about leadership in general and how to manage yourself, because you have to manage yourself first before you're able to manage others, right? So great advice. Well, circling back to the IVPA, could you share an example of a policy or initiative spearheaded by the IVPA that you believe made a lasting impact on the veterinary community?
So, Christie, that's a great question, right? So I think if we circle back to the main focus of the current strategy and the current goals and focus of the IVPA, I'm in full support, because I think the most impact would be is if, the IVPA and its members could get a seat in the House of Delegates. Once IVPA has that seat in that structure of the AVMA, they're going to have that formal seat at the table. And as the AVMA changes and as our profession changes, they will continue to have that influence within influencers. I think the AVMA does a great job at representing veterinarians as a whole. They have really strong capabilities when it comes to lobbying and interacting with policymakers and lawmakers. And that's a really, really important skill set that the IVPA needs to take advantage of. And so instead of kind of further fragmenting the profession, I think it's really important that IVPA influence within the profession and really help make it a better place for everybody and have a really open, positive, balanced conversation. So I really think the most important initiative or policy that really could be done is really achieving the goal that Dr. Arnie and the rest of the board has set out to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for sharing that. So how did you balance preserving the tradition of independent practice with the need for innovation in an ever-evolving veterinary landscape?
Yeah, I think for a long time, my generation, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but my generation, and maybe we could just put it into terms of years, right? So I think up and through probably the early 90s, mid 90s, I think veterinary medicine was very hidebound. And I don't, whether that was because it was women or men, I don't think that was the important part. I think the important part of how hidebound and focused on tradition and conservative values that veterinary medicine was, I think that really came around, working within a very structured, organized medicine of the AVMA. And it's a very good structure, and it's a very good tradition that we absolutely should respect. And I think what happened is in the 90s and 2000s is when we had technology take off. We had corporates come in and understand the wealth that's within the profession. We had so many changes occur worldwide. We had new generational, expectations. So as new generations came on board and became adults, they had different expectations on what was success for them. And I think that we were just slow as a profession to respond to that. And I think it's really, really, really important that we preserve that respect. I remember being in my veterinary class, and I remember the thing that I valued the most is we could have the food animal guys and the vegetarians and the vegans, and everybody got along. I felt like we really respected what each group had to say, and we understood that we were all there for the purpose of making life better for everybody. We had disagreements about how we were going to make that happen. So I'm hoping that will carry through. And so what I would ask new generations is to maybe slow down and understand that older generations lived in a very, very different world. It was much harder to get lending. Veterinarians weren't viewed as the same level of profession as we are now. Animals didn't have the same place in our lives. We didn't even have effective flea control until the 90s, right? So how could you have your dog sleep with you in bed at night if you couldn't even control fleas? So the world was a very different place for folks who became professionals, before the 90s. But then I would also say we have to have some flexibility, and we really, really need to embrace and be creative in how we view ownership in the future. And that's to benefit us all. I mean, with the gig economy and with the technology that we can embrace, there's so many different ways that we can make practice in our profession the way we want it. So again, it's just patience, empathy, understanding, and above all else, curiosity. Having that curiosity. Hey, what's life like for you every day? Like, what are you dealing with? When you were coming up as a veterinarian, when you were a vet student, it doesn't matter if it was 3 years ago or 20 years ago, what was important to you? And I think we'll discover that we are products of our time, and we just need to be empathetic and patient about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much on that deep perspective and taking the time to really answer that. I'm sure it's really important to our listeners. With everything that you've done over the years, we have a lot to learn from you. So thank you so much. And thank you for wrapping up that discussion about the IVPA. And one thing that, we should talk about is what was born from that was this podcast. And so I want to talk to you about the Veterinary Insider Podcast. And to begin with, what was your vision for this podcast when you started?
Yeah, well, it's really funny, right? Because I think the podcast is a really good example of what we've already talked about in theory and concept, right? So I kind of had this half-baked idea that, well, everybody's doing a podcast. Maybe we need to do a podcast. And actually, I had lectured on ownership and management, and I had a young veterinarian come up to me and she goes, hey, do you have a podcast? I can't make it to all your lectures. Do you have a podcast? And I was like, no, we don't have a podcast. And so I thought, we need a podcast. And it got very convoluted and very unclear what it was that I personally was trying to communicate to our listeners. Who were we trying to communicate? What were we trying to communicate? And so initially, I really, really, really wanted it to be a way that veterinarians could learn from others that they may not have access to, right? So it shouldn't be just a commercial, but, a veterinarian who maybe, practices in the middle of Alaska and doesn't even get a visit from a sales rep. Like, I would love that veterinarian to have insight from, a sales rep who works for Merck, who's hearing all kinds of things that are happening about corporate veterinary medicine and how things are changing. So that's where the name came as Veterinary Insider, is the idea that hopefully our veterinarian listeners can learn from other stories and really make the future what they want. And they can really see insight into how the world is changing. So you have that broad perspective and you can really get outside of your narrow focus. Because I remember feeling very, very isolated when I was in practice. I was a single practitioner. I worked by myself. It was way before the days of technology, so I didn't really have a lot of access. I felt very disconnected. I had moved away from my vet college. I was a single mom. I owned my practice. I was literally working 7 days a week. And I just remember feeling so isolated and so alone and so hopeless. And so if you're struggling to make connections, if you really kind of don't have time to network, if you feel like, you're just don't have the capacity or the resources to network like you would, I'm hoping that you'll find from this podcast, there are lots of stories. We're all a lot more alike than you think, and that you'll come away with some golden tidbit that will help you really realize your best self.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And before we go on to the next question, let me remind everybody that you can subscribe to the Veterinary Insider Podcast on Spotify and YouTube. And don't forget to check out our podcast library to access all of our previous episodes and tons of great tips. So let's continue on that theme. What do you think the audience values most about the podcast?
Again, what I hope they value, it's really been enlightening, Christie, for me to actually have the privilege of interviewing folks. I'm always in a rush, and I'm like, well, this person would be good, and let's see what they have to say. And I've really been amazed at hearing the emotion and the connection and just the deep connection and pride that we all have in our profession. And so I'm hoping that we really take that, everyone, it doesn't matter who listens, but I'm really hoping veterinarians take that as inspiration. It gives them hope, and it helps elevate them to think about the future, and that we are masters of our destiny, that life is hard, but we are resilient. We're smart, resilient, hardworking people. And when we put our mind to something, we can make anything happen. If you can get through vet school, you can get through anything. And again, if you understand all these complicated and complex biological systems, you can understand anything that you put your mind to. And so I'm hoping that everybody will take hope away from the podcast first. And second, I hope it extends their virtual network. And so I'm hoping, like, for instance, anybody who wants to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to connect. So I'm hoping it virtually helps them extend their network. And then lastly, I'm hoping it opens up and maybe they get a skill. They learn about a new skill here and there, and some resources for finding those new skills. So those are kind of the three things that I hope people take away from this podcast. But primarily, it's hope, because the future is fabulous for veterinarians, and we just need to embrace that.
Yeah, we all believe that. Thank you so much. So as I step into this role, what advice would you give me to ensure a smooth transition while continuing to build the podcast's established strengths?
Yeah, I think I'm giddy because, Dr. Arnie's done a great job as coming in as president. And Dr. Christie, I'm so happy to be able to feel like I'm turning this podcast over to good hands. And so, I think the number one thing is just keep it real and authentic and genuine. And, one of the things I hope that you will embrace, and I hope veterinarians embrace, is this idea of, it's going to sound weird, but this idea of conflict, right? So we really need to be comfortable with the idea that we don't always agree. And I think sometimes we try to be polite. We try to keep things in a very positive way, which is good. We should never undermine or be toxic or anything like that. But I think sometimes we miss opportunities to have really genuine, authentic conversations if we're not comfortable with conflict. And so what I'm hoping that you build is more genuineness, more authenticity. And I think with conflict comes diverse dialogue. And it's just interesting, and it makes you think about things in a different way. And so I'm really excited to see what you accomplish, and you've already done a great job today. So
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being able to interview a variety of different guests, and on different sides of, some topics and some issues. And so, yeah, you're right. Really kind of getting the authentic feeling out there really helps us in the community to try to understand really what's going on and what people think about some of these, harder to discuss topics. It's easy for us to sit behind our keyboards and, just play spectator, right? But, who are those people that are taking those chances? Who are those people that are in the ring doing the work, and what can we learn from those people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I had somebody challenge me recently. I expressed some very honest and genuine opinions about corporate veterinary medicine, and it was based on some painful experiences I've had with corporate veterinary medicine, right? So with my experiences with corporate medicine, because it is so focused on generating a return on investment to stockholders, which is absolutely what a corporation does. A corporation, absolutely, their mission is to first and foremost deliver a return on investment to stockholders. If they didn't adhere to that, you and I wouldn't have a 401k, and you and I wouldn't have a retirement fund, right? And so those are really important values. But sometimes that's not where I want to focus my medicine. That's not how I want to focus the way I run a business or the way that I want to, deal with my medicine. And so I kind of shared my feelings that I want veterinarians to own their profession. I want veterinarians I would rather a veterinarian get fabulously wealthy than the Mars family. I'll just be direct. I'll just be blunt. That may come back to haunt me, but I really feel like, the thing is I'm going to digress here just for a minute, go a little bit off topic, but
yeah, you're sharing what a lot of us are thinking. So
right, and so what I think that veterinarians it's been hard for veterinarians is life is a contact sport. I promise you, the Mars family. I promise you, the executive leadership at Mars. I promise you, the executive leadership at any company, no matter how much you admire them, whether it's Amazon or whether it's Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or, whatever brand that you absolutely love and live and die for. I mean, it is a contact sport, and they are going to protect their business, and they are going to make as much money as they possibly can to get a return on whoever is that shareholder and that investor. And that is okay. Remember, we said profit is a good thing. Profit is what fuels innovation. It's what fuels safety. It's what fuels our ability to take care of ourselves and our patients. But guess what? They're not just going to hand over their profit to you or me. It's a contact sport. So feel comfortable with being competitive and making sure that you own your business, your money, your profession, your finances. We can be respectful, we can be positive, but we have to be comfortable with conflict, and we have to feel comfortable with competition. And so I'm really hoping that everybody out there feels good about that. I did have somebody call me out on that and thought I was, they thought I was being too negative about corporate veterinary medicine. And so what I'm saying, that should not be construed by anybody who works in corporate as anything disrespectful. If you're an associate who really is benefiting from a corporate relationship, that's awesome. That's fabulous. That's your team. That's your tribe. But really, don't be fearful, because nothing is fatal. Like, I used to tell the people who work for me, tell me what the problems are. Let's have the conversation. When you make a mistake, let me know, because the only thing I cannot fix is death. It's the only thing I can't fix. So if we're having a problem and we have conflict, let's get it out. Let's have a conversation. We can move on. We can get it done. We can be respectful. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because the only thing that we cannot undo is death. And so nothing in anything that we're talking about here tonight is fatal by any stretch.
Yeah. And profit is not bad. And we want to make sure that our independent veterinarians understand that, because if we're able to keep our wealth within the veterinary community, then we can then invest in other things that also benefit the veterinary community, right? Instead of, giving it up to, big corporations that have other interests as well. besides, the veterinary, perspective, but to be able to build upon the wealth gained by an independent veterinarian, that's so exciting to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, because it's all about taking care of your family. It's about being able to execute on your principles and core values. We talked about that to begin with. If your core value is you want to make veterinary medicine as accessible and as low cost as you possibly can, you can do that. You can do that with your profit. You can actually be profitable and then give back. You can give back. You can give back to nonprofits. If you're profitable, this is what I used to do. I was highly profitable when I owned my practice, and that allowed me the autonomy to take charity cases. I didn't have to get approval for anybody. I would just do the case for free. Hey, you know what? I remember very specifically, this is a single mom with her son crying in my exam room because they had a blocked cat, and I did the whole case for free. And that made me feel so good. And I knew they couldn't afford it. And everybody else paid full price. And I had that profit left over that I decided, I had the conscious decision and I had the choice that I could actually give that profit to somebody else in order to make a good impact on their life.
Yeah. Another important part of being a, independent veterinarian in your community is that you have the flexibility to help where needed, if needed, right? So you don't have to go through all the red tape of, corporate. So, yeah. That's amazing. And since this, podcast is all about you and your legacy, I do want to get into, I want to make sure that we cover what's next for you. Okay. And I know you alluded to it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but I really I want you to go deep here. Okay. So ask you.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited. So my official title is Chief Commercial Officer for CenterPoint Biotech. And so follow us on cpbio.com as well as alphaionvet.com. We have lots of really exciting and cool products coming to market. And I am actually really excited. So I've learned that my jam is startup products because I love to see the future. I love to see how these products are going to make the lives better for everybody else. And so just check us out and follow us and connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to connect and network. So, and absolutely, if you are new to networking, I'm happy to do an informational interview. Never go wrong with that. Again, that's acceptable language as you're building your network. So really just follow us and connect with me.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And what advice would you give to others in the veterinary field who are considering a significant career transition or embarking on new adventures?
Yeah. So in my experience, I was thinking about this the other day, like you really have to have patience. And so it took me an entire year to go from being a business owner to finding a job in industry. Literally, I worked with a recruiter. It took me a whole entire year. My current position as Chief Commercial Officer, actually, I have to thank Tim Baum. He is actually a mentor and coach of mine and very important part of my career growth. He gave me he put his confidence in me that I'm going to help him build his dream. And I started that relationship with Tim Baum way back. Oh my gosh, that was, I think, in 2015, 2016. So literally that was a 7 or 8 year journey of staying in touch and my growth and skill sets. And so it's really, really important to have that patience and that networking, being curious, open to the universe, and just making sure that you stay strong and stay resilient.
Yeah, perfect. So how can we continue to support you moving forward?
Ooh, wow. Well, you know what I would ask for veterinarians across America? What I would ask veterinarians across America is be open to connecting with your colleagues in other areas. What I find is sometimes there's an aversion or apprehension about staying engaged with veterinarians in the commercial field. So it's really interesting. I can be at a trade show. The trade show floor is my sandbox. It's where I meet with my friends. It's where I have fun. It's where I do a lot of my work. And I hear other veterinarians say that they just don't like being in the trade show. They don't like talking to sales reps. They, just feel really uncomfortable. And so I would just say, the way to support me and other colleagues in the commercial side of things is just be open and curious and just know that, again, you have autonomy. You can push back. Treat us like big overgrown Labrador Retriever puppies and just say no. Just say no when it's time to say no.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So how do you envision the future of independent practice, and what role should organizations like the IVPA continue to play in advocating for these practitioners?
I think it's going to be a very interesting future. I think that a lot of the corporatization that's occurred is, I'm hoping and thinking it's kind of reached its max, and that I think the tide is shifting and turning towards veterinarians coming back and owning more. If we look at Europe, as many as 60 to actually 75% of the clinics in Europe, depending on the country, are actually corporate owned. And that makes independence a small minority or a smaller minority. I think here in the United States, there's conversation around maybe 30-40% of practices are now corporate owned. And I just really think that we're going to stay the course and we're going to continue to have a lot of independent ownership. And so I think what IVPA can do to really maintain that is to really help teach veterinarian skill sets. There's huge amounts of opportunity. You just need to learn the skill sets in order to take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. And it, from what I hear, corporatization is, in some areas starting to level off a little bit. And I hear it's a really good opportunity for us independents in 2025 and moving forward. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree, right? So again, okay, so I just want everybody who's listening to think about this. Think about, I'm going to make this up completely, but pretend we're the Buffalo Bills in a football competition with the Chiefs, and just think about how those fans and those teams just fight it out, right? Who is going to be the winner? We are in it to win it, right? And so don't think about this as being conflicting and uncomfortable. Who's going to win? Just if you want to set up shop next to a corporate because you think you have a better idea and a better way to do it, have pride and do it, because that only improves veterinary medicine for every animal and every person in our society. Competition is good. Be in it to win it.
Yeah, go for it, right?
Go for it. Compete. Take no prisoners.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such an inspiring conversation with you. I'm so just privileged to be able to sit with you, for this whole time and even learn more than I knew before. And our listeners also had the privilege of learning your origin story and kind of how you just fought it out and you just kept coming back and
fight it out.
Yeah. And so hopefully, our listeners will be, driven and motivated with this message and able to reach out to you if they need any help. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, will you promise me to come back and visit us?
Anytime you want a counterpoint, I'm your person.
Awesome. I'll keep that in mind. So, we definitely want an update and see where you're at in your career. I'd love to see what you're doing in 6 months, 12 months. But seems like the road is clear now and, everything is up to you.
You got to wear sunglasses, man. Got to wear sunglasses.
That's right. All right.
Well, thank you for your time, Christie. Looking forward to hearing and seeing all that you accomplish. And so again, I'm gonna go back to my old role. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and you stay in touch.
That's right. Thank you for joining us on this special episode of the Veterinary Insider Podcast. Today, we had the privilege of speaking to Dr. Bonnie Bragdon, the visionary founder and past president of the IVPA. Her insights on leadership, evolution, and the veterinary industry, and the valuable lessons drawn from both success and failure have been truly inspiring. Her parting words remind us that our journey is not solely about the milestones we achieve, but also about the values we uphold and the impact we have on our community. I hope that today's conversation inspires you, whether you are an established professional or just beginning the journey in veterinary medicine, to embrace change, learn from experience, and continue to innovate in your own practice. And before we close, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Bonnie Bragdon again for sharing her remarkable story and invaluable wisdom. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being a part of our community. Your commitment to learning and growth is what drives us to continually bring you these conversations.
All right, Dr. Christie, so glad to be here. Looking forward to the future.
Yeah, awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much.